The Ottawa Senators get back-to-back wins and games with back-to-back hat tricks. Ross Levitan of Locked On Senators is here to tell us about how the Senators are doing down the stretch. All that coming up on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. My pleasure to welcome back to the show a familiar face from Locked On Senators, Ross Levitan. And Ross, your team, it's not been the easiest season, but I think you want to play the Red Wings a little more often.
Yeah, certainly. I wouldn't be opposed to that. It was a great weekend. The new additions are fitting in well. I would hazard to say the Ottawa Senators might have the best trade deadline pickup, and they're not even a contending team that was looking to buy. As you look at Mathieu with 7 points in 2 games over the weekend, he's got a really tremendous attitude. He's come in, he's played hard. Like, imagine the mental grind of playing for Tampa, going for a potential three-peat. He was in the pod as an extra, didn't get a game in 2020, played 6 games in the playoffs of last year. And then this year he was really a regular on the team. So the disappointment would be certainly understandable to go to a team who's near the bottom of the standings, but he's come in here and done his part and looked real good doing it. So it's certainly been good. It's been an emotional week for Senators fans, of course, starting last Monday with the sudden passing of owner Eugene Melnyk. They certainly didn't play their best, but not their worst in Nashville. They fell in that game, but since they had their first meetings against Detroit, which is pretty rare to think, a divisional opponent. They had one of these games postponed, but to wait till April to play your first games, they've got them 3 times in 12 days, including the 2 this weekend. So it's certainly busy times with the Senators. And yeah, I mean, it seems like there's just never really a dull day around this team, whether it's on ice or off ice. There's always a storyline.
Let's talk a little bit about Mr. Melnyk's passing. I know it wasn't easy for Senators Nation and for the organization. Talk to me a little bit about his impact on the franchise over the years.
Yeah, well, it all started in 2003. The Ottawa Senators had been going through a lot of financial troubles with Rob Brydon was their old owner, and they missed paychecks for players. They were in bankruptcy. The only people who wanted to buy them wanted to move them into the States. This was around the time where Nashville was getting a team. There was more. Atlanta was just new, I think maybe 3 or 4 years old at the time, and people hadn't realized that it was going to fail miserably the way it did. But everyone was interested in bringing hockey a little bit further south. So the fact that Eugene Melnyk swept in and took this team out of bankruptcy and was the only person who was planning to keep it in Ottawa, I think went a long way. Certainly, it's the only reason why I got to grow up with going to see hockey games. The team was so good then, too. They were in the middle of 11 straight seasons of making the playoffs. The new ownership comes in, and that year, they win the President's Trophy for best team in the National Hockey League. Then 2 years later, they make it to the conference final, and then the year after, they go all the way to the Stanley Cup. So, final, I should say. Niedermeyer, Pronger, Solani, that Anaheim Ducks team was pretty unbelievable. Jaguar in goal, but his legacy really starts and ends there. I think that there's a clear disconnect between the franchise and its fans over the last few years. I think that would have all started in about 2017. He basically threatened to move the team when everyone was celebrating that 100-year anniversary of the NHL. It was in an outdoor event, and it just really left everyone with a sour taste in their mouth. So it's a polarizing figure, but of course, a lot of people wish that he would sell the team. Nobody would ever wish death. He was 62 years old. He had 2 young daughters who are still in their early 20s, who I guess technically the Sens are owned by 2 20-year-old girls right now who are still finishing up their education. One of them's at Queen's University. By all accounts, very bright girls, but just interesting. The Board of Governors, it's such like an old boys club. And now you have this fresh blood there. Now, we don't know what's going to be the long-term ramifications. I know Eugene Melnyk would have wanted this in his family. So I wonder if there's a situation here over the next year or two where they keep a minority share where, okay, it's still a legacy for them as a part owner, but for the day-to-day, I think everything except relocation is up in the air. I think it's pretty clear. Elliot Friedman, Brent Wallace and Ian Mendez, all the people with great sources in and around Ottawa and the NHL. Like, there's a team in Arizona who's playing a 5,000 seat arena. I don't think they're in any hurry to move a team out of the national capital of Canada. So I think that anyone who wants to bring those rumors, you can put those to bed. But beyond that, there is a lot of uncertainty right now surrounding the off-ice part of the franchise.
Yeah, and it's something I'm sure we'll touch base with you in the future to keep tabs on. And you'll keep tabs on it on your show, obviously, as well. The last two games, hat tricks, both games, both wins over the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, top to bottom, this team is playing better hockey recently. Talk to me a little bit about what they've been doing well.
Yeah, so I went to the game in Winnipeg last week, and they scored 4 goals in the third period there and came back and got the win over a Jets team that at that point was still really fighting for a playoff spot. That hope has probably sailed away a little bit since, based on Dallas and Vegas starting to win games and Winnipeg being unable to beat teams like Ottawa, for example. But since that game, I mean, they're 3-1-1 in their last 5 games. Is that great? No, but for a team that's been at the bottom of the standings, really after November, they were done. They went 1-10-1 in November. COVID swept through the entire team. They weren't scoring goals. Tim Stützle started the year on a 15-game goal drought. He's now a point-per-game player over the last 15 games. So it was all individual growth that you're looking for down the stretch. And the best player nobody's ever heard of is Josh Norris right now.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, he's an absolute stud in the making right now. Number 1 center, just scored 3 goals tonight to hit 30 on the season. And when you look at how he's scoring these goals, it's the Ovechkin spot on the power play, albeit the other side. He's a left-hand shot. He's got 12 goals in 16 games since coming back from his injury. And even though he missed 15 games, there's only 3 players in the National Hockey League who have more power play goals than he does. So when you're looking, and he's in a contract year, so cha-ching, I'm sure he's loving that. But this was a homecoming of sorts to him. He's a Michigan guy, so got to play in Detroit on Friday in front of friends and family, gets a goal there, and then the hat trick tonight was just a perfect cherry on top to a great weekend for the Senators and for their young talent, because they were robbed with a bit of injury. I don't mean from winning more games, but I mean from fans getting to see Drake Batherson play his first full NHL season when Aaron Dell threw that greasy shoulder at him in January. He missed 20-plus games. So the top line, which has been such a bright spot with Norris, Tkachuk, and Drake Batherson, it's just kind of got taken away from fans there with a couple tough plays ultimately. So to get that back's great. And now it's kind of piecing together what the play is this summer, because fans have been very patient. The Ottawa Senators have actually never missed the playoffs in 5 straight years in franchise history. It was only 4 from inauguration when they had 10 wins in 84 games in 92-93, Gil. So they went from that. They went from that to a team that made the playoffs 4 years later. Now it's already been 5. Fans aren't ready to wait a 6th year. They need action. Last summer, the big fish they went out and got was Michael Del Zotto. They're going to have to aim a little bit higher if they hope to compete this upcoming season, because the Atlantic's not getting any worse. Those teams at the top, you have to close the gap up, not expect them to close the gap and fall down towards you.
No question. It'll be an interesting offseason in Ottawa, and I know you'll be on top of it every step of the way. Ross, why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers where they could find your podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, well, the beauty of Locked On Network is the local experts on the biggest stories. So you can just type in Locked On Senators on your Google search or on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, really. You can find Locked On Senators, just like you can find Locked On Islanders in the same spots. We're on social media at Send Central on Twitter and LockedOn.Senators on Instagram, but that's not too active. You should just follow on Twitter if you want to interact with us at Send Central. But yeah, it's been fun. And how about a little trade deadline acquisition looking good too? So we're going to be covering a lot of the Mathieu Joseph fallout and what that can mean going forward. So even though it seems like a lost season, there's still lots to get excited about if you're following the team in the nation's capital.
All right, Ross, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, Gal.